Hello and welcome. When you write code, it's not uncommon to encounter problems that prevent the program from running correctly or producing the desired output. This is where you need debugging. So debugging involves locating these issues and resolving them to ensure that the program functions as intended. There are several ways in which you can kind of debug your code, and typically what we do is we have some sort of additional trace or debug statements which we enable in our application, and then we can see line by line what's going to happen. Yeah, you can kind of add more stuff if you want to debug or reproduce the issue. Typically, why you have issues in software at first place is like, no, maybe your algo is wrong, or you have kind of forgot to initialize the variable correctly, or maybe or reinitialize correctly, or you probably state setting the kind of data into some different or wrong place. As I said, like, one way is like, you putting extra kind of debug or trace statements. Second, typically, the one I like the most is like, putting a breakpoint and then using Eclipse or IntelliJ or whatever favorite IDE you use. Then run your application, debug your application, and go line by line. Okay, so real time, like, you basically inspect your object which are kind of loaded into your JVM, and then you are able to see how the state of those objects, state of those variables, changing as you kind of move from one step to other step. In this video, we're gonna look like, how can you actually debug Apache Camel roots. Okay, it's not very easy or kind of straightforward to debug Apache Camel root, but I think I have kind of learned few tricks over the time, and I'm going to share those tricks with you. And using those tricks, basically, you will be able to debug your Apache Camel roots quite easily. Okay, so there are a few ways in which you can kind of debug your Camel roots. So one is called tracing. Okay, so tracing is a property provided by the framework. You enable it, and you will be able to see how your route is traveling and how it's kind of impacting or making changes to exchange and body. Okay, really nice way. No code change required. You just turn the property on, and you start seeing those bunch of extra tracing statements. I really like it. Like, no, it can kind of helps sometime, because you don't have to make any code changes. Obviously, you're not gonna turn the tracing on in production because it's gonna have a negative impact. Second trick, which I use most of the time, is like, having a processor. Let's say if I have a processor in my root, I can very easily put a breakpoint. If I don't have a processor, I can just add a one, just temporary processor with one temporary statement. It can be simple log or sout or anything, and put a breakpoint, relaunch my application in debug mode, and then from that point onward, I can go step by step. I can inspect the exchange, body, headers, properties, you name it. You'll be able to see every single thing over there. The third thing, which is really powerful actually, okay, which is the camel test support. The assumption here is that if you have a test written already for your camel root, and you're using camel test support framework, then without making any code changes, yes, without making any code changes, when I say code changes, I mean the actual root, without making any actual changes to your root, you will be able to debug in real time very easily. Okay, very powerful stuff. I'm going to demonstrate that in a minute. Last but not least, let's say in your application, if you have enabled JMX, then using JMX locally or remotely, you can debug your application in real time. Okay, we'll spend some time going over JMX as well. So let's jump to our code. Okay, so let's say I have this particular root. I don't have any kind of process over here. Okay, when I start my root, it just basically prints some log information, then it calls this REST endpoint. Okay, and then it just does some sort of transformation, then sets something into the body. Okay, and then it prints the body at the end, and then right at the end, we see this end statement. Very simple, straightforward example, which I'm going to demonstrate over here. So if I start my application, okay, let's say if I start my Spring application, which is this Camel application, Spring Boot application, what you will see, like, every I don't know, 10-20 seconds, this timer will invoke this particular root, okay, every 20 seconds. So our application is loading up. Okay, as you can see now, hopefully in next few seconds. So Tomcat started on port 8080, right? So what you're noticing over here, that have I got my, okay, circuit breaker, yeah. So what you notice over here is that our root started, yeah, this is what we are printing at info level. Then actually let's go to this one. This is nice to see. Okay, so I am simply printing start, then another thread or another endpoint got invoked. It's at this point it's saying body is this, okay, and then we are printing end right at the end. So 2-3 log statements, as you can see, as part of my root. Now just assume for a second that there is something wrong. Maybe I'm not able to kind of invoke this REST endpoint, or when I'm invoking the REST endpoint, when the response is coming, I'm not able to kind of process that response correctly. So one thing you can do is you can check, like, step by step what's really happening. Because what you notice over here is my body response is saying, this is my body response, which I got over here. Okay, so let's say if there was some sort of issue with it, what I can really do is I can put a dot process over here. Okay, I can put just put it anywhere, doesn't really matter. So I'm just gonna put dot process over here. Okay, p as I said, just have some sort of, like, foo statement. I'm just saying here, for example. Okay, and now what I will be able to do, now, I'll be able to put a breakpoint over here. Okay, when I'm putting a breakpoint, and when I launch my application in debug mode, what you will notice, our debugger will stop at this particular point. Okay, so application is kind of loading in debug mode. It's running very slow. I don't know, a bit tired actually. So our application, the Tomcat, has started, and you will see in a second. Just notice, I hope you can see on the screen, the breakpoint is now working and our debugger has stopped at this point. It allows me to now inspect the exchange object. Okay, so if you see at the bottom, this is our exchange object. I know it's very small for you because I have a very large monitor over here and I can't increase the font, but hopefully you'll be able to run it locally in your Eclipse or IntelliJ. You can see over here I have a context, really powerful stuff. I can see the camel context. I can see all the properties. I can see the body or the in message which is coming. I can see the exchange ID, and I can see where this particular request is coming from at this minute, because we put our breakpoint just after this too. So you can see it was actually initiated by the from endpoint was timer. Okay, remember, our from was timer. So you can see it showing that the request was actually initiated by this particular endpoint. Okay, this was our start root. You get to see the root ID, you get to see the history node ID. Basically it's just saying I just came to process one. Okay, yeah, so bunch of stuff you can see, which can be, depending on your problem statement, you might be able to get answer over here. Some header is wrong, some property is wrong, or you're probably doing something else in your root. Okay, so really good and powerful stuff. So I'm gonna stop this thing now. Okay, so also I will get rid of this dot process. The second thing which I want to show you was having like inbuilt tracing kind of pattern by Apache Camel. So there is a property called camel.springboot.tracing. If you put this in your properties file or your application YAML file, just turn this on, i.e. just kind of set the value to true. If I now start my application, just notice what was happening earlier. We were seeing three lines. We were seeing start, we were seeing the body, and we were seeing the end. But it was not printing other stuff as it was jumping from one endpoint to another endpoint. What we will be seeing now, hopefully, by enabling the tracing, just by enabling tracing, I have not made any code change, you will be able to see the full history of the route. Okay, if I expand the bottom screen, what you can see now is we have a start. From start, now it's saying I am going to invoke this REST endpoint. Very good stuff. When I invoked the localhost endpoint, my body was null at this point. Now I managed to invoke the REST endpoint, and then you will see somewhere over here my body got populated. Okay, so where is the body? Where is the body? Okay, static fallback message. You see exchange ID, you see body. Maybe at one point it was null, then it kind of invoked the another endpoint, body got populated. And so you can see over here, without making any code changes, you are able to kind of see the full tracing of the route from starting and going from one endpoint to the another endpoint. And it's literally printing everything for you over here. So again, depending on your use case, this information can be very useful without making any code change. Okay, now let's look at the third thing which we discussed earlier, which is basically having some tiny bit of changes in our test class. Let's just assume you have a test class, okay, and you're using this utility class called Camel Test Support. If I run this particular test class, what you will simply see, it's invoking some kind of route which has 4 or 5 steps, but I'm not able to debug. Okay, the reason I'm showing you this use case is, let's assume a route has been given by another team or third-party vendor or whatever, and you are not allowed to make any code changes. You don't have flexibility to make any code changes, okay, but you still want to debug it. So how can you debug it? There are few methods provided by Camel Test Support which you'll have to override. Okay, the very first method you want to override, if I take you to this particular class called Camel Test Support, it's saying is use debugger. By default, the value of it is false. Okay, as you can see the documentation, it says override to enable debugger, and that's what we want to do now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this particular method, bring it back to my test route. Okay, go anywhere, just say override. And what we want to do now is we want to say, yes, I want to use debugger. That's the first thing you want to do. Now, what this utility class has given now is they have given two things basically. You have option of kind of putting a breaking statement or putting a debugger just before an endpoint has been invoked or after endpoint has been invoked. Sometime you want to see what is the state of your exchange before you kind of executed a part of endpoint. Sometime you want to see what happens to the exchange after you have executed. Correct? Now you will have to override couple of more methods. Okay, and those are called after, before. Let me actually try to find after debug, I think. Tear down, clean up, debug after, I think it's called. Yeah, single steps debugs and Camels invokes this method after processing the given processor. Okay, So I'm going to simply copy this thing. Okay, as you can see, it's a protected over here, so we should be allowed to override it. So I'm going to override this thing, copy paste. Okay, you can leave this as is. Now what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to put a s out over here, okay, just to say I'm here. You can actually print everything, like you can print exchange, you can print processor, you can print definition, ID, label, blah blah blah, as a sys out. Or second thing, what you can do is you can debug in real time. Okay, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put a breakpoint over here. What it's simply going to do, this is debug after. There is another one called debug before. Debug before. Oh, there it is. Yeah, let's do both of them actually. Okay, so this is debug after root has been processed, and this one is called debug before. Okay, we're just gonna override it. And same thing I'm going to do over here is I'm just going to say sys out. Okay, here before blah blah blah, doesn't matter. And over here I'm going to say here after. All right, let's put a breakpoint at both places. We put breakpoint at line number whatever 68, which is after, and this is before. Okay, now run the same test but run in a debug mode this time. Okay, so our IDE can stop when it reaches at this particular line. See, so now you can see the exchange. You have access to exchange. As you can see, exchange is populated. It's showing some exchange ID. You can click on plus icon, or I can actually go over here. I know, apologies, it's very small text for you, but again you can see, like, it's coming from start, and then it's showing all the properties you need. Okay, and this is the processor mock step 1, whatever definition is there. So this is before the particular endpoint or processor was invoked. If I say kind of resume the program, what you will notice now is coming after. Okay, now my step 1 has been executed. Maybe the processor has kind of some sort of side effect to the exchange. If it had a side effect, I will be able to debug over here. Okay, I can resume over here, and then you will see again before has come, because our root has several kind of processors or several nodes or several endpoints, and camel root is jumping from one node to another node at this point, and each time it goes from one node to another node, before will be invoked and then after will be invoked. Make sense? Perfect. Now this was our third way of kind of debugging camel root. Now let's look at the last but not least in any manner, the JMX way. Okay, so as I said, in order to have a JMX thing working, you have to enable JMX in your application YAML, which I have done it already. Now what I'm simply going to do is I'm going to start my camel application. You don't have to run in debug mode. You just assume your application is already running somewhere remotely but has a JMX enabled. Okay, so I'm just going to start my camel application now. So how can you connect to your running application using JMX? There are several kind of profiling tools, okay, which you can use. JProfiler is there, but I'm going to use the free one which comes with your JDK, called JConsole. So how do you launch JConsole? You simply open terminal. Okay, assuming all the class path etc is set, you have the right JDK etc. So what I'm simply going to do is I'm just simply going to type JConsole. Okay, and hopefully JConsole will be launched pretty soonish. Yeah, there it is. So again, my apologies, text might be bit small because my monitor is very large, and unfortunately this thing doesn't allow me to change the font size. As you launch JConsole, it will show you some local processes. because my application is running locally, so it's quite easy for me to just select the local application, which is Camel application running in the background, as you can see. If, however, you have remote process running, you can just grab the host name, port name, service name, whatever way you are allowed to access your remote server. You can put those details over here, because after that the step is normal. So what I'm simply going to do is I'm just going to double click on my Camel application. It's saying the connection is not secure. I don't care because it's running locally. So this is how JConsole looks like. It's gonna show you like heap, thread, CPU, classes, how many classes loaded, etc. I hope you are familiar with this tool a little bit. So how do we actually debug using JMX? One thing you need to do, which I forgot to mention, you will have to add this particular dependency in your application, in your pom.xml. It's called org.apache.camel, and the artifact ID is called camel debug. Okay, the version of this particular dependency will be your core. Okay, because I'm managing in dependency management, so I don't have to specify version because they are all coming from the same starter. So this is the dependency you must add. Okay, there will be one management and then camel debug. This will allow you to debug your application in kind of real time. Okay, so two assumptions: one, this dependency is in place; second, JMX is enabled. Then using JConsole, you will be able to monitor or debug your application in real time. Make sense? Okay. So my root, as you can see, it's kind of happily running in the background. But what if I wanted to kind of step into it using JConsole? So what you can do really quickly, let's have a quick look. Where is my JConsole gone? Have I killed JConsole? I think I have. Sorry about that. Where is my JConsole gone? I think I have probably killed it. Let's relaunch it. Okay. Here is my JConsole. Camel application, insecure connection, all good, no problem whatsoever. So I'm going to kind of put these two things side by side. Okay, so you can actually see the console in the background. What you want to do in this case is you have to click on Mbeans. When you click on Mbeans, then you want to go to org Apache Camel package folder, whatever you want to call it. What you will see at the end, a folder or package called Tracer. Inside Tracer, this is our Camel context, you will see a class called Backlog Debugger. Backlog Debugger has a bunch of operations which you can use to connect to your application in real time. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much of time over here because there are way too many kind of options over here. So first thing you want to do is you want to say is enabled true. So you might be able to see in the background, maybe it's gone already. It's our application said that JConsole is connected or JMX client is connected. So what you want to do over here is now you have to add a breakpoint, very much like what we were doing in our console. We were double clicking and the red ball came. Similar way, we have to manually add a breakpoint. How do you add breakpoint? You need to know the node names. Okay, so the node which I have or the endpoints I have are log1, log2, log3. Again, you can see all the nodes. I think there is another one called probably processors. Yeah, as you can see, these are all the various breakpoint nodes which allows or which can be used to put breakpoint. Okay, you can use circuit breaker one, which will allow you to put breakpoint right at the beginning. I'm gonna put at the log one. Okay, so let's do that. So first thing we did is said is enabled true. I think I have already done that. Let's do it one more time. There is no harm. Now come to add breakpoint. Put a state node name called log1. I think it was log1, add a breakpoint. Okay, as you can see in the background, it's saying adding breakpoint log1. So the breakpoint has been added over here. Now notice one thing, it's saying node breakpoint at node 1 is waiting to continue for exchange ID, blah, blah, blah. Very much like a debugger mode. Now, internally, our application is waiting for the instruction to move ahead with the next thing. But what I want to do instead is, I want to say, please dump the message or the exchange in a XML format. Yeah, if I double click on it, oh, so I think we may have to say step. It may have done step. Then we have to say dump trace message as, oh, sorry, I have to say which message you want to dump. I'm gonna say log1. There you go. Okay, so in real time now, you are able to get the exchange and other information from our root. Okay, you can see the exchange ID is there, some headers are there, body is null at this point. Okay, so remotely now I'm able to debug my root. So I'm gonna say resume all. Okay, and let's disconnect it, exit. Perfect. So I think that's pretty much end of this tutorial, where we learned how you can debug camel roots, okay, and using all these various methods: tracing, processor, camel test support, and JMX. I hope you enjoyed this session. If you liked the video, please probably give me thumbs up, leave a comment. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so. I'll be thankful. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video, hopefully soon. Bye for now.